Welcome to the 2023 National Virtual CARES Act Conference. I'm James Heyman, the Director of the Entitlement Communities Division within the Office of Block Grant Assistance. This is the third day of our conference, and this is also the third session in our best practice series on resilience within the comp plan. This series has been received very well by our grantees as well as by our appropriators on the Hill. As been mentioned, these sessions will be recorded and will be posted on the HUD Exchange, and then the department will be developing a report based on this best practice series, and we will have that posted as well. I encourage you to take advantage of the Whova app as well as the Q&A and chat portions of this so that we can have some engagement on this topic, and we look forward to hearing from our grantees at this time. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Green. I am with the City of Las Cruces. Thank you for allowing me to present today. I have worked for the City of Las Cruces for 14 years, and 12 years of those is with direct HUD program experience. Just a little bit of information about the City of Las Cruces. We get about $1.7 million between CDBG and home entitlement funds. And then for CDBG CARES Act funding, we received about $1.1 million. Overall, as a section, our budget is anywhere from $15 to $25 million. And then Las Cruces is the second largest city in the state of New Mexico. So we're one of 5 entitlement communities and one of 2 participating jurisdictions. So we're very near El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Our population is about 100,000 in our city, and then we're also the metropolitan area for the county, and our total county population is about 200,000. As a team, our goal is to really focus on the basic needs of our community, especially in the last few years with CARES Act and ARPA dollars. And so we were able to use a lot of our existing framework to push out funding and projects. And our areas of focus as a team is housing, food insecurity, poverty, health, and economic well-being. We are a team of 8. Our line item, our line of business reports directly to the city manager. That's a new change for us. We have been housed previously within the economic development department, and then prior to that with this community development department. But I had this slide included because I wanted to just emphasize that we're not alone in this work. We really work with our sustainability office and our community engagement office. Our sustainability office primarily works on climate resiliency, reducing the city's reliance on fossil fuels, and then their new shift is electrification. And so they do a lot of great work that I wanted to acknowledge them for. And then our community engagement office and communications supports a lot of the city messaging, especially when we're working on the consolidated plan and the action plan. So resiliency in New Mexico looks a lot different than the rest of the country. We're very fortunate in that we don't have natural disasters and they're not common. What we do have is a lot of extreme weather events. And then of course, pandemic responses, and then our proximity to the border also opens us up to some humanitarian crisis. So when we're working to build resiliency, we're really looking to address those social systemic problems that are facing our residents. We have very high rates of generational poverty, food insecurity, poor health outcomes. And so we know that our families and our community members they struggle with those day-to-day survival needs. And so extreme weather events or extreme events in the city have a significant impact on their day-to-day lives. And then some of these pictures are just a recent Haboob storm we had. And then while we are in the desert, there's an occasional, every couple of years, we get a snowstorm, which is really crippling to a city that typically doesn't get snow. I wanted to talk about two areas in which we do consolidated plan and community outreach. While we have a number of strategies, the two I wanted to highlight are upcoming. The first is what we call our Doña Ana County Resilience Leaders. It's a group of 50 service agencies and community stakeholders. There's about 50 agencies, but there's well over 150 people that are part of this group. And it was born out of the Anna Age 8 book, which is a book about child welfare and maltreatment. And so this group has really gotten together to evaluate barriers within these 10 sectors and develop action plans to build resiliency across the county. But more importantly, the reason I wanted to acknowledge them is because they serve as a connection point to those citizens when we're trying to do citizen participation. And so we utilize them both for stakeholder input and then to help build bridges for meaningful public engagement, especially when we're trying to work on outreaching groups who are least likely to participate. Many times as a local government, we don't have the trust with certain community members, so we utilize them as trusted organizations to build that bridge for community. And this group in particular is addressing critical needs of residents right now while working on some of those upstream initiatives that help improve situations for families long-term as well. The second resource I wanted to cover is our social service campus, which was started in 1994. It's known as the Mesilla Valley Community Hope Campus. It is a recipient of CDBG Public Service Funds, CDBG Infrastructure Funds. They helped us push out a lot of our CDBG CARES Act dollars. And then there's one agency that receives home tenant-based rental assistance. So the campus is approximately 8 acres. It was recently expanded to a 16-acre campus. And it's anchored by a consortium of 5 nonprofit organizations. And so the alliance agencies work collectively to provide a various amount of services, including a day shelter for people experiencing homelessness. You can see our safe space encampment. There's a daycare, medical services, and a soup kitchen and a food pantry. And then as we build out the additional acreage, we're looking at permanent supportive housing and additional service providers. So I know I could talk about the campus and their work a lot, but I wanted to focus on the point that was most relevant for consultation and citizen participation. And if you can click it one more time, it looks like the text is missing. Oh, no. So if you could go back then, sorry. So during COVID, next slide. During COVID, it especially highlighted the need for expansion and capacity building. So on the left is our new food pantry. We're going from a 500 square foot building to a 13,000 square foot building. And the building on the right is our new community kitchen facility that's under development. So it will be an expanded soup kitchen. And then it'll also allow us to increase, do some economic development and job training, especially around the food service industry. And so from this campus, we're able to mobilize in those extreme events. So we can stand up cooling stations, warming stations. We're able to do mass distribution, food, medical services. We can receive large amounts of donations and store them. And then in a really extreme situation, we have the capacity to feed much of the city through this campus. What we utilize the food distribution in particular for outreach is many times we'll put postcards in the food boxes. We also do surveys while people are waiting in line. And then the new building, which is opening in July, will have additional office space for either city staff or visiting agencies to meet with individuals. And then we're able to use the distribution center to do some additional outreach. So one example I had is every year during times change, our fire department distributes 9-volt batteries through this agency. As many of you know, that people living in poverty have a higher fire risk. And so this is one way that we can ensure that people have working smoke alarms to prevent that fire risk. And then Casa de Peregrinos, who manages the food pantry, also operate rural pantries. So if we needed to do much larger outreach countywide, we could do that. So my takeaways for this presentation is that just build partnerships, so nobody does this work alone. As a local government, our nonprofit partners really make our job easier. They're able to do their specific services much better, much faster. Meeting people where they are, especially when you're looking for that meaningful outreach or that meaningful community participation. So we do have an obligation to outreach to those who are least likely to apply or participate. And so meeting them where they're receiving services is an excellent way to do that. When possible, use trusted organizations to build those bridges and make those connection points. Many times they're doing the day-to-day work with those clients, and they know them much better than I as a government official will. And so we really want to use those organizations and their experience to put that meaningful outreach into our consolidated plan. And then get creative. Well, I know many of us do the newspaper ads. There's much more ways that we can do outreach. So we've done utility bill inserts, postcards in the food boxes, social media outreach. And then many times we will hold our public input meetings at their facilities, especially when it's a topic that impacts them the most. So this is our contact page. I have an excellent staff and we're all available for questions. So thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I will pass the presentation to Jeannie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for jumping on today and being willing to listen to us. So I am Jeannie Sutton. I am with Lee County, Florida. I have been with the county since 2012 now, and that entire time have worked with HUD funding as well as other state and local grant funding. Lee County has been a CDBG entitlement grantee since 1989. We get a little over $3 million in our regular CDBG allocation each year. For CDBG CARES Act, we did receive about $4.5 million. And some of you may be aware, we are also the most recent awardee of CDBG disaster recovery dollars in the amount of $1.1 billion. So we are located in Southwest Florida. We're that little red dot there on the bottom. Typically, we do a lot of housing projects, housing rehab and reconstruction. We also use public services to coordinate with our homeless coalition. We are an urban county entitlement grantee, meaning that we serve as a pass-through for our qualifying municipalities within our jurisdiction. We also do some nonprofit capital improvements and down payment assistance with our CDBG dollars. So our citizen participation model has kind of evolved over time. When we first started doing our most recent consolidated plan was about 4 years ago. Our public participation process was very standard. So we had our 2 public meetings and we advertised in the newspaper. With the most recent consolidated plan that we did, we started to evolve that to be more engaging with the community. So we developed a concept called community conversations, where we actually advertised in a much more like marketing friendly way, held meetings in different areas throughout the county, specifically those that were most likely to utilize CDBG services. And then we've also relied heavily on our Community Action Agency, which is a group of stakeholders that have an interest in serving low-income populations in the community. We've used the Community Action Agency as kind of the sounding board for a lot of our CDBG planning, and they actually serve as the public hearing venue for the public meetings that we do have. During COVID, obviously, we had to adapt like most other people did. So we had to shift our citizen participation to account for the public health crisis. So to accommodate that, we adopted virtual meeting methods. We started out with GoToMeeting, but eventually settled with Microsoft Teams to ensure full accessibility. We also, during the pandemic, had a large homeless encampment that started in one of our public parks. As a result of that, we started getting a lot of public feedback during our Board of County Commissioners meetings about homelessness and just challenges with that population. So out of that crisis was a lived experience group that was created. And that allows us to really get feedback from people with lived experience, whether it's in homelessness, in poverty, with behavioral health conditions. That group meets pretty much on a quarterly basis and serves as a sounding board again for other planning activities that we have. In addition, we started doing virtual consultations during COVID. So this allowed us to do a lot more in-depth via email and also Teams meeting consultations with our stakeholders like the COC and our homeless coalitions, as well as our housing authorities. We also took the time during COVID to expand the membership of our community action agency. Over the past 20 or so years, we've had 5 target neighborhoods, low mod areas where we've invested a lot of CDBG dollars. Some of those communities struggled during COVID, and it forced us to kind of take a look at our existing membership on the Community Action Agency and update our citizen participation plan to broaden that membership to make sure that we had adequate representation across the entire geography of the county, not just from those 5 communities. One of the kind of innovative things we were also able to do during COVID with our CDBG dollars was create a mobile application. So our department has the resource engagement and community hub. And so that reach app, as we call it, provides an opportunity for residents to access push notifications, news blasts that may be going out by the Human and Veteran Services Department, or any information related to new services, that sort of thing. So we're able to push out information about public meetings on that mobile app. Anyone that has a smartphone can view it and have access to a whole plethora of information. So not too long after COVID subsided, we were impacted by Hurricane Ian. So this again has prompted us to take a look at how we're engaging residents in our planning processes as we now move into planning for CDBG DR. So one of our elected officials began a recovery task force. Part of that recovery task force has started to do town hall meetings to engage residents about their needs, unmet needs as a result of the hurricane, and also just gather their feedback about how the county as a whole responded to the storm. So these meetings are definitely a different model than what we have done in the past. It's very much more open forum, and they're held in pretty much all of the affected areas throughout the county. For our CDBG DR action plan, we are also planning to do a couple of additional public meetings that will be more focused on getting specific feedback about the CDBG initiatives. We're hoping to do those when our draft action plan is published for the CDBG DR funding. For consultations, we are also planning to shift that model for CDBG DR a little bit. We're doing a more focused group where we're having groups from specific stakeholders of nonprofits and our housing authorities, as well as our neighboring municipalities, come and actually have a more personal one-on-one conversation about their needs and the projects or things that they need to accomplish within their stakeholder group. Again, I mentioned that it's really important for us, especially for CDBG DR, to make sure that we're having meetings at varied times. We're doing things in a very interactive style. We found that, people, obviously the trauma of the hurricane, but is impacting people's ability to kind of think through and provide feedback that's meaningful and helpful for us. So being more interactive, educating them about the programs and the types of options that we have for the planning process is going to be really important to get the information that we need to have good programs designed. So beyond just the traditional public engagement for the consolidated plan or any of our action plans, we have also really expanded our public outreach for fair housing. This is something that kind of came actually out of Hurricane Irma. We had some funding through our state for CDBG, and we're required to submit quarterly fair housing events. So as a result of that, we started doing some pretty innovative and creative things. Our staff are amazing and created a coloring contest for local elementary schools where teachers were provided talking points to talk to staff or talk to students about how to undertake like what fair housing meant and how to be a good neighbor. And then they each drew a picture about that conversation and submitted it to the county. I think the winning child was able to win a small prize. And of course, their photos are posted on the county website, which is pretty cool for them. Staff also developed an online quiz, very interactive and real world examples about fair housing and different types of discrimination that may happen. And then also the fair housing video that is on the screen. I don't know if you can hear it, but it is narrated. If you can't hear it, we'll make sure that the link gets sent, I think. Right. We can go to the next slide, please. Awesome. So some takeaways from our presentation. Education is really key. I mentioned we're really trying to be interactive and educating folks about CDBG as a whole, the types of programs that can be provided, and providing information to residents in really plain and clear language. Of course, also providing opportunities for persons with limited English proficiency or those who might need other accommodations to participate in the feedback process. Also, one of the things that's really important is active and ongoing engagement. So since our initial consolidated plan, we've really tried to engage in the community, keep our, like Natalie said, keep great relationships with our nonprofit partners so that when we are trying to pull people together, they can help us reach a broader network of individuals to provide input. We're always trying to expand our outreach events and make sure that we are reaching people in, like Natalie said, where they're at. And again, trying to restructure our comment process so that we can get feedback from people electronically, whether it's via the mobile app, on website surveys, or whatever means might be most easy for people to be able to provide input. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Watts. I'm the director of the Office of Community Development Local Government Assistance. I've been working with the Louisiana State CDBG program since 1997. Louisiana has been a state CDBG grantee since 1983, and our office is the lead agency for the consolidated planning process. Our allocation for FY23 is $22.5 $44.7 million, and our total allocation for CDBG-CV is $44.3 million. When working to set priorities for the state annual allocation and the CARES Act funds, we wanted to fund programs that create assets for the communities or improve their existing facilities or systems. We feel like this assists with the resilience and the sustainability of a community. So with our annual funds, we primarily fund public infrastructure projects such as water, sewer, or street improvements. With our CDBG-CV funds, we funded HVAC improvements to public facilities in parishes or municipalities that are low mod by census data. We funded parks to provide outdoor recreation opportunities where citizens could socially distance and have those opportunities to be outdoors and have things to do. We funded a business incubator as well as a statewide food bank. The Louisiana State CDBG program has 304 eligible municipality governments and 58 eligible parish governments. It's important for our staff to look at the needs of all eligible parishes or municipalities when designing our program. You can see from the picture on this right that it shows the regions of the state. Much like many of you, different regions or areas have different needs. So we have to work to get input from citizens and local government officials throughout the state during our planning process. As part of our consolidated planning process, we conduct a statewide needs assessment every 2 years. In the past, we have funded on a 2-year cycle, so we take applications and then fund projects from that pool of applications for the next 2 years. We did have to make an adjustment to this due to the large amount of funding that had been distributed due to COVID. So for our 23 program year, we accepted applications for street improvements only. Our state legislature allocated $750 million of ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds to water and sewer improvements. We felt that the large number of projects that would be awarded with these funds would significantly slow down the implementation of any water or sewer projects that we would have funded with our annual CDBG funds. Therefore, creating issues with our expenditure rate, which is monitored by HUD regularly. Tools that we have used in conducting our needs assessment are an online survey tool. We conduct public meetings, we attend association meetings, and we also use our website. We put all of our notices on our website. We email the information regarding the online survey tool to all of our state legislators and request that they share that information with local governments in their districts. We send the information to our Louisiana Municipal Association as well as our Police Jury Association so they can share the opportunity to answer the survey with their members. We really want to encourage local government officials and citizens to complete the survey. We share the information with administrative consultants as well as engineers that participate in our program or have indicated interest in our program. But we want to make sure that we're getting that feedback from the local government officials as well as the citizens, not just the consultants and the engineers. And with all of the effort, you can go back one more. With all the effort that we have made in trying to increase participation, we still think that we have low participation. On the previous slide, I mentioned that the number of eligible applicants, which totals 362, but the most submissions that we have ever received through our online survey tool is 120, and we really want to increase that number. We do seek all opportunities to engage with local government officials. We attend the Municipal Association and the Police Jury Association's annual conferences. We also attend the Louisiana Rural Water Association conference, since we do fund a lot of projects that are sewer and water and municipal owned systems. We conduct webinars, and we are beginning to live stream our public hearings in order to encourage participation. We host training workshops to encourage persons to come and get familiar with the program and be more comfortable. And we use our Facebook page to provide notifications and reminders, and also to highlight projects that we have funded so that potential applicants could see proposed projects or potential projects for them to consider. We're now working to institute a regularly scheduled virtual technical assistance hour on a monthly basis so that anyone can log in and ask questions or discuss issues at that time. So some of the challenges that we have faced in the citizen participation process is, even though we make all of these efforts to reach the audience that we're seeking, we still can't get there. For our public hearings, there's very little participation, and we have also noted on the local government side that there's very little participation. We do encourage them to hold their meetings at different times of the day and different days of the week to try to encourage participation. We look forward to HUD updating their guidance regarding the citizen participation requirements and their publication requirements. Local governments are required to publish notices in the newspaper, and most people don't receive a newspaper anymore. Online notifications through the website, social media, and postings around town and in utility notices reach more citizens than a newspaper publication. And while the local governments that we work with can and do use those other means for notification, they're still required to have that publication in the newspaper. Many of our local governments are very small and have low revenue. And so these publications are very expensive and have continued to get more and more expensive. So if and another issue that we have had a lot recently is that if a newspaper fails to publish the notice for the local government, then that could result in the local government's application being disqualified because they haven't met the federal citizen participation requirements. In Louisiana, we are regularly exposed to extreme weather events. We have hurricanes, we have ice storms, we have significant rain events. These events often cause damage to our public utility systems, which could delay recovery for the citizens. So resilience of these systems is a primary need, particularly in our rural communities. When we look at resilience of a system, we're going to look at two items. We're going to look at their infrastructure, the actual physical infrastructure of the system, but we're also going to look at their financial structure. The needs of our state far outweigh the amount of available funds, so we run a competitive program. We reviewed our scoring criteria when we wanted to see what we could do to incorporate resilience into our program. We looked to see if there were ways to encourage the local governments to include activities in their applications that would increase the resilience of their systems. We added a resilience criteria where an applicant could earn 2 points in the scoring process if the application included a resiliency plan as a separate attachment to their project description, and then specific items or improvements that were identified in that plan were included in their cost estimate for their application. We could use, we also looked to see if there were any other scoring criteria that would negatively impact an applicant, so that would discourage them from taking the steps to include these activities in their application. We use cost effectiveness as a scoring criteria for our programs. We define this as the amount of grant funds divided by the total number of beneficiaries for the project, which gives us the cost per person for the project. The project with the lowest cost per person is given 10 points, and all others in the same category are prorated from there. Since cost effectiveness is a large part of the application scoring, we did not want applicants to leave out improvements related to resilience and that could increase the resilience of their system in order to get more points for their cost effectiveness score. So we made the decision to not include any costs related to resilience improvements in the cost effectiveness calculation. A second factor that we consider for resilience is the financial structure and position of the system. Does a system collect enough revenue to sustain themselves and make improvements as needed? In order to receive the release of funds, we require the system to participate in a rate study. This rate study is conducted by the Louisiana Rural Water Association. We require the system to adjust the rates if it is identified at the completion of the rate study that needs to happen. And we will not release funds if they don't do so. We do want the system to have a sustainability factor of 1.15, which means that the revenue of the system is 1.15 times the operation expenses. And we do require that they include a fund in there to replace the asset that is being funded with the grant. The Louisiana Rural Water Association, when they are conducting the rate study, they also look at policies and procedures of the system to ensure that they're financially sound and that they are enforcing those policies. Because we have found that sometimes, particularly in the smaller systems, they may have a policy that says that a customer will be cut off if they don't pay their bill, but we often find that they're not doing so. So you may have a large number of customers that are not paying bills, which would reduce the amount of income that you have coming in, even if you have a sustainable rate. So going forward, we're going to continue to look for ways to incorporate resilience into our program, our annual state CDBG program. We do have a separate section in Louisiana's Office of Community Development that administers the disaster recovery allocations and also the mitigation funds. So they do put forth a large effort in the resilience of our communities to help offset those extreme events. We will continue to work with our consolidated plan programs so that we can incorporate resilience into the consolidated plan. And we're also going to be looking at ways to increase our reach to the audience that we are really seeking so that we can get that important feedback about what those needs are in the communities of our state.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite all of the panelists back on for a moment, and let's do some Q&A. We've got some good questions in the Q&A box now, but if you have more questions, please feel free to keep them coming so we can have a nice, robust conversation and get everybody's questions answered. So I'm going to kind of round robin this a little bit, and I'll start with Jeannie. You talked about a mobile app. How did you guys go about creating the mobile app? That seems really helpful. What was the first step there towards creating that?
So first step, obviously being the county, we have an IT department as well as our procurement department. So we started out by working with our IT department to see if it was something we could build in-house. Our IT does have a couple of mobile apps that they have constructed. They let us know that it was not possible to build in-house, but they were going to help us write a scope of work for a vendor. So from there, we went over to our procurement department and worked with IT and them to develop a scope of work. We really wanted to focus on accessibility and providing information. So a lot of our scope was about creating, really user-friendly, plain language, accessible information. And we had a big emphasis on those push notifications and providing people the opportunity to receive direct notifications on their phones.
Perfect. That sounds really good. I hope that you guys get a lot of traffic through that app. I think I would use one if my jurisdiction had one. So. All right. For Natalie, how did you solicit donations for the kitchen?
Many of our nonprofit partners actually get donations, but we did have a situation where we had a humanitarian event and we had many asylum seekers seeking refuge at the campus. And so the community really banded together and was able to drop off donations at the campus.
Fabulous. All right, wonderful. All right, for Tracy, you mentioned online surveys. How did you disseminate those online surveys?
So we created the survey online, and then we used every way possible we could think to reach people. We mailed out hard copies of notices to our local governments. We emailed all of our legislators and asked them to distribute it to their municipalities and parishes and their districts. We share it with the governor's office. We share it with the municipal association, all of the engineers and consultants that have ever worked in our program or persons that are interested. We kind of keep an email list and we tell people they can be added if they like, and we will send those notices out to them as well. And then we put it on our Facebook page and our website. And one thing that we are looking to do that we've talked about doing, because we go to the annual conferences for those organizations, we're going to set up laptops and have them be able to complete those surveys there while they're there. In the past, we've just handed out slips with the link so that people, we could give everybody and get it to them. But we still lose a lot when they get the paper and then they go home. And so we want to provide opportunity for them to fill out that survey while they're there.
That's a great idea. All right. Thank you so much. All right. For Jeannie, who convenes the Community Action Agency? Is that an independent organization? Is that an organization independent from the county?
So in our county, the Community Action Agency is actually an advisory committee for our Lee County Board of County Commissioners. So it is convened by our staff liaisons through Lee County Human and Veteran Services. In other communities, though, that may vary. The Community Action Agency is actually a required by Community Services block grant funding received through Health and Human Services. So that body probably exists in many communities in one way, shape, or form. In other neighboring counties here, the Community Action Agency is actually chaired by a nonprofit and staffed by a nonprofit. So many other communities may have CAAs as well. For us, it just serves that dual purpose of providing feedback for the CDBG plan as well as our CSBG plans.
Good, thank you so much. All right, going back around to, well, actually, you know what? Let me pause for a moment, ask a question to each of you. How did you handle your consultation, your citizen participation, kind of pre-COVID and then during COVID and then now? We'll just kind of round robin and kind of the evolution of how you were handling it and then how you handled it during that time and then now, what's going on. So I'll start with Tracy, if that's okay.
Sure. So pre-COVID, everything is face-to-face. We would have meetings, large meetings. And in fact, the year prior to COVID, when we were conducting our consolidated planning process, we actually scheduled meetings throughout the state in the rural communities to try to encourage persons to come and talk with us about what the needs are in the communities. Then with COVID, we started doing a lot of things online, using our Facebook page to put some information out there and live stream some things. And we encouraged our local governments to do that as well, that they didn't have to have that face-to-face meeting, but they needed a way for the community to be able to interact with them as they put this information out. And so they needed to have that, that opportunity for those communities. And moving forward, we're kind of trying to go back. We're incorporating both. We're having that face-to-face opportunity, for people to come forward and let's talk, but we're also going to continue to live stream our meetings so that people can get in online and get that information.
Okay, thank you so much. Natalie?
We're very similar to other communities. So pre-COVID, it was very much in-person meetings. We would have them around the community and at different times of the day just to provide many opportunities for participation. Like others, we had very low participation. And then during COVID, we switched to, our state was in full lockdown. So we did all online participation. And then moving forward, we've done the hybrid model. So we are still in person, but then we provide a Zoom link. So for those who don't want to come out in the evenings, they're still able to log in to the meeting and have conversations with staff and provide their input. And then we've explored a number of other virtual options similar to the other two presenters, where we're doing electronic surveys, or we're soliciting participation where people already are.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Jeannie?
Yeah, very similar. Pre-COVID, definitely all in person. During COVID, we shifted primarily to doing things in the virtual platforms. And then now I would say we do provide the option for virtual platforms for at least our stakeholder consultations. For public participation, we're still planning to do in-person meetings. Just found them to be more efficient. We do not, in most of our like community nonprofits where we hold our meetings, there's not the facilities to do live streaming or that sort of thing. So have shifted back to mostly in person for those. But like I said, for our stakeholders and some of our nonprofit partners that we work with closely, we do try to provide the option for a Teams meeting or some other format.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Jeannie, I'm going to stay on you for a moment and ask, how does the recovery task force work?
That is a great question. So I'm more than happy to share a link about it. It is the Resiliently Recovery Task Force. So like I mentioned, that was set up by one of our elected officials post-storm, and they are gathering input for more of a high-level comprehensive community plan related to resiliency and disaster response. That is, again, some of the information gathered through the town halls that they are holding will be used for our CDBG-DR action plan, but that is kind of a planning initiative at a larger community level, higher than our CDBG-DR planning process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Natalie, I think you just mentioned using Zoom, the Zoom platform. Does Zoom provide a transcript so that you can easily record input for HUD record keeping purposes?
We've never utilized that functionality. We typically hire a transcriptionist who takes notes for us and provides those minutes. I do know that Teams will do a transcript. So, and then I just heard an excellent suggestion from our IT department. Apparently, ChatGPT will now review meeting recordings and spit out transcripts for you. So we haven't used that functionality, but I wouldn't be surprised if Zoom does let you do it.
Yeah, ChatGPT. I haven't heard of that yet, so I'm gonna have to Google that myself. But it's a very good tip. Thank you. Do either of the other, Tracy or Jeannie, do you guys use Zoom and happen to know for sure whether or not there's a transcript option?
I know we use Zoom, and one way we use it is we have everyone log into the chat or with their name and who they're from. So we have a transcript. You can print from there. So we have a transcript of who attended. I'm not sure about transcribing the whole meeting.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. And Jeannie did put a link for the recovery task force. I'm going to go ahead and just send it out to everyone in the chat. So thank you so much. That will be helpful. Thank you. All right. So this question's for Natalie. What partnerships went into the kitchen project? That's a huge expansion from 500 square feet to 13,000 square feet with lots of great space in there. I love the economic development component and job training. Were there other partners that worked on that?
There was. So the primary partner is the nonprofit themselves, the Casa de Peregrinos food pantry. We also used the state to do capital outlay. So there was the actual state finance authority and the legislators. And then we have some other departments within the city that are supporting the project as a whole. So our public works department, our economic development department has been working on the jump training component. And then, of course, the team that works on CDBG funding and our nonprofit funding.
Thank you. Tracy, can you give us a little bit more information about the competitive criteria for resilience that was, included in that scoring criteria?
Sure. We look at various things when we score an application. A lot of the things we look at are the severity of the problem that they're addressing. We have an engineer on staff that reviews all that information and scores those applications. We look at their low mod percentage, and we look, as I explained earlier, there about their cost effectiveness. How much money are you spending per person that you're benefiting? Because we want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, what we're spending. And with resilience, they're going to be creating a plan. So they're going to look and identify deficiencies that they have in the system that they need to address for certain extreme events. It could be whatever they have to deal with. If they deal with a lot of hurricanes, if they deal with a lot of river flooding, it could be ice storms, whichever issues that they often encounter, we want them to examine and see what they could do for their system to make it more resilient. And then to go one step further, we want them to identify things that they could include in the project to address the issues that they identify. So maybe they need a generator, maybe they need to provide, some raise some structures to get them high enough to be out of the flood area. And then we want them to include that in their cost estimate so that they use these grant funds to put these in place, because we want to try to create a more resilient system.
Thank you so much. Natalie, can you tell us more about the resilience leaders and how those action teams work? I think they work within service sectors.
Correct. So the resilience leaders were divided into 10 different thriving services sectors. And so they're made up of various nonprofits or stakeholders who may or may not have expertise in that field. And so I can talk a lot about the housing one because that's the component that I sit on, but we meet the entire resiliency leaders meets monthly as a group, and then the sectors meet on their own schedule. And so for housing in particular, we developed an action plan. One of the things that we wanted to see is a warm handoff between providers. And then the other excellent outcome out of the childcare group is they were able to do a referral service between childcare providers, because there was some providers who had a lot of vacancy and then other providers that had long waiting lists. And so they were able to do these connection points and increase their communication and referrals. And so that way no child was left without a pre-K spot. And so people weren't staying on the waiting list for a very long time, and they could seek the same service through another provider. And so it really increased that collaboration across the spectrum of services. And so everyone is in different sort of stages of their action plans, but ultimately it's to just increase the capacity around the systems that prevent some of those child incidences that we were seeing both in the state and nationwide.
All right. Thank you so much. We did just get another question that's interesting and happens to be related to childcare. When hosting town hall meetings, does your jurisdiction provide childcare? If so, is that provide with a city staff or with contracted providers? So I want to ask this of each of you, and also add on, has it ever been a consideration, or what other ways have you considered and either decided to or not to kind of provide childcare and provide things that help people get to town hall meetings? I'll start with Tracy.
No, we haven't ever had that as an issue. As a state, from us conducting these meetings on a statewide basis, we haven't had anyone indicate that was an issue. And we have not gotten any feedback from our local governments about whether or not that's something they have to do.
Thank you. Natalie?
We typically don't for our meetings, but we have had other city meetings in which childcare is provided, and they usually contract that service out. Although our Parks and Rec has a team that does go out and does that public engagement, but it's usually for older children. And so they'll set up what we call street plays, and we're able to hold meetings separately while Parks and Rec sort of engages those older children in games and different activities. But if we're looking at smaller children, we have either hired that provider, or many times we look to our partners. We have one that's on the campus that provides childcare services. So ideally we would partner with Jardín de los Niños to provide that service for us.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I've actually never heard of a jurisdiction providing childcare, so that was really interesting. Okay, Jeannie?
We do not. In many of our public meetings, families do bring their children, and it ends up normally working out just fine, but we do not normally provide childcare.
Thank you so much. Okay, this question is for Tracy. You'd mentioned building in, incorporating resilience into your con plan. Can you tell me about some ways that you've done that so far, or plan to do in the future?
Well, we've done it through our method of distribution and how we're, funding projects. We're looking at, in our mind, sustainability and resilience kind of go hand in hand. And so we're looking at ways to help our communities be sustainable so that they can be resilient when they're needed. Another thing that we're doing is encouraging consolidations of utility systems. Many of these systems were created in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of the people that are handling the systems and administering these systems are now aging out, and they're leaving, and they don't have anyone coming in to replace them, as well as the population loss that's occurred in those communities. And so we are encouraging smaller systems to consolidate in order to be more sustainable and have a larger number of customers. So those types of ideas and things that we're talking to other state agencies about, and other associations to get information. And then as a state, they're starting to look at what different state agencies can do as for resilience. They are trying to create a state resilience officer position that's at a cabinet level with the governor this legislative session. And then they would appoint in each agency a resilience officer that works with that state officer. And so we will be a part of that, and to see what we can do to incorporate that into our plan, as well as share that amongst the other agencies that administer consolidated planning programs.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I want to actually ask the question to pose that question to Natalie and Jeannie as well. So I'll start with Jeannie. If you can speak to how you are incorporating sustainability or resilience within your con plan, either your most recent one or maybe that things you're considering for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most recent one, things like the mobile app, figuring out ways to make our programs accessible without people having to come in was a big shift for us as a department. We shifted a lot of our what used to be former like paper application processes to online. We believed at the time that was a resilient thing to do, right? To make things more accessible, build things out online. We kind of had conversations immediately post-storm that what we thought we were doing to shift things all online, now all of a sudden after a hurricane, nobody had internet or power or access to any of those online programs that we had spent most of COVID developing. So I think now what we're focusing on is being resilient in both ways, making services available to people in traditional formats as well as in electronic formats, should there be any sort of storm or other natural disaster that cuts off power and communication like our most recent one did. And then, of course, you know, as we shift now towards storm recovery, we're looking at building in resiliency measures in pretty much everything we're doing, from construction standards to repairing our infrastructure and our public facilities. We had our crisis unit for behavioral health crisis was shut down until about a week ago since the storm. So figuring out how to make our services much more resilient so that we don't have those big gaps like we had this time.
All right, thank you so much. And Natalie?
A lot of our work has been around the heat island effect. And so for those who don't know, that's in the core of our city, we have a lot of pavement. And so it's much hotter in that area than it is in maybe new areas where it's there's developed trees and different building types. And what's interesting about the center of our city, it's also the lowest income areas of our city. So we've been working on a number of initiatives to ensure that we're rehabbing streets, and our streets are putting in landscaping and trees that can help bring down that heat island effect. And then one of the things that we're working on is we're seeing a big push to electrification. And so we want to make sure that our lowest income residents are able to access that electrification much sooner and in a more sustainable manner than previously. So there's a lot of incentives sort of coming down the pipeline for electrifying or retrofitting to electrification. And we know that our lowest income residents are going to be the most impacted when that happens. So through our home rehab program, we're retooling that to incorporate some of that electrification. But we also want to make sure that we're not increasing their monthly costs when that electrification happens. So we're kind of trying to balance the scales between making sure they're able to access those incentives and move forward and not get left behind on our natural gas system. Because our natural gas system is a nonprofit, so they just take those costs and then divide it by the providers. So low-income residents are the only ones left on the system. Their costs will eventually grow when everyone else has moved to electrification. And so we're trying to balance those two things moving forward to ensure they're able to catch up.